Welcome to the Hit Like a Girl podcast. This is High Tea with Grace, where we spill the tea on HIT. I'm honored to welcome Dr. Geri Landman. She's a pediatrician and board member of Moonshots for Unicorns. She's also on a rare disease journey to find a cure for her child. We're very excited to learn from you today, Dr. Geri. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Grace. I'm so excited to be here.
So tell me about your personal journey that led to the formation of Moonshots for Unicorns.
Yeah. So we have two older girls and love being parents. And so decided to become a parent to a third baby who was born last May, Lucy. We just felt like our family was complete when she arrived. And being a pediatrician, I started to notice around 4 months old that she wasn't quite doing some of the same things her older sisters had done. They like her older sister, she was hungry at 4 months. She would watch that spoon go back and forth from the plate to my mouth and say, why aren't I getting some of that? So I tried to sit her in the boppy chair and she flopped to the side. The same was true at 5 months. And so we visited the pediatrician and got a referral to neurology, and everything was pretty reassuring. The neurologist evaluation said this is probably benign hypotonia, benign, low muscle tone. And she started some physical therapy and she was improving like crazy. She learned to sit independently. She was playing with toys. And then we went on a family trip to Panama when she was about 8.5 months old. And she just sort of got a virus, either a stomach bug or something, and seemed to kind of fall off a cliff with it, whereas previously she could sit up for 15 minutes. She was falling immediately to the side. She stopped making good eye contact, which was really scary. She stopped eating solid food, just straight up refusing it. And so we came home and had a series of, messages and ER visits. And finally, I emailed her neurologist and said, something seems very wrong. And she said, I hear you. I sent her a few videos and they were very concerned. And they said, come on in for an expedited admission to Stanford. And so Lucy was admitted for 2 nights and she had the whole big workup. She had an MRI of her brain. She had an EEG to look for seizures. She had a spinal tap times 2, actually, and a nerve conduction study. And all of that was reassuring as well. And so we've had these moments along this journey where we've been like, okay, out of the woods, things are okay. And she started getting better as she kind of got further out from this little virus that she got. We were so lucky in that the neurologist who was on that week that we were in the hospital happens to also be a neurogeneticist.
Oh, wow.
Let's be thorough and send off some broad genetic testing. And so she sent off from Lucy the next week with just a little, swab at home. By then, Lucy was back to her baseline. We weren't expecting to find anything at all. Sent off some genetic testing. And on April 18th, she sent me a text message and said, Lucy's genetic testing is back and I'm really concerned. Let's meet in an hour. That's a text message to get as a mom. And so my husband came home from work and we learned that day that Lucy has something called PGAP3, which is a gene I have never heard of, a class of disorders that I have barely heard of. It is not something you learn about in medical school. It is not something that was ever tested for on prenatal testing or anything else. And it basically affects her neurons' ability to communicate with each other. The little flags that are on the outside of cells come loose for Lucy. And so, we took our week. The neurologist told us that she may never walk. She will likely never talk. She will have severe intellectual disability. And she is likely to develop what's called refractory seizures, so seizures that are really hard to treat. And we just broke down, we couldn't believe that Lucy was there with us at the time of the meeting. And she was just babbling and playing in front of us, looking like a totally normal baby by that point. And it seemed so shocking. So we took our week and we cried and we went on a lot of hikes. And then we said, this doesn't have to be her path. It's 2022, you know, gene therapy is a thing. Drugs are repurposed all the time. What can we do as two parents situated in the Bay Area among some of the biggest healthcare startups and technology there is, medically trained, with great communities around us? What can we do to give Lucy the best possible chance at life? And that's the origin of Moonshots for Unicorns. You know, Moonshots are obviously shooting for the moon, maybe landing among the stars, but a huge project. And unicorns, Lucy's our unicorn. And there's a lot of unicorns out there that we've met since we started this journey.
So what are some of the options for families of patients with rare diseases? What options do you have in terms of developing therapeutics? Are there any technologies at home that could help diagnose and manage rare diseases? Do you see potential for that in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think diagnostics have come such a long way. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of diagnosis for these rare diseases. I know there's a couple of companies working with legislators right now to really try to make this genetic testing available for everyone. It was so easy, Grace. It's literally like a kit got mailed to me. I swabbed Lucy's, cheeks, and I sent it back. And 3 weeks later, we knew 483 of her genes.
Wow.
Which is amazing to me, even as a pediatrician. And I want that to be available to everyone who has a rare disease that might be of genetic origin, because it's game changing. The fact that we found this out for Lucy at 10 months old lets us have such a possibility of altering her life course. And it makes me feel like less of a crazy mom. I think we all know this, who have kids, when you're looking at, what may be minor symptoms and saying, am I crazy or is this real? And so I think the importance of diagnosis and home diagnosis, easy diagnosis, it cannot be overemphasized. To your second question of what are the options for families with kids with rare diseases, particularly those of genetic origin. Like I said, it's 2022. There's probably a couple different buckets that people can pursue. One of which is just kind of going the supplement, what nutritional remedies are known for your disease, doing a deep dive into the scientific literature on those things. So Lucy, for example, is on high doses of vitamin B6. Completely benign almost, but it's shown to prevent seizures in kids with this condition. And so we started that, within a few days of her diagnosis. The second bucket is probably drug repurposing, meaning you take this long list, maybe 6,000 drugs that already exist in the world. 2,500 of them are already approved by the FDA, and the other 3,500 come from somewhere else in the world. And you can't obviously try 6,000 different drugs on Lucy or on any child.
Yes.
But the technology exists now to put Lucy's gene into other organisms that you can test. And this is such a highly preserved gene that yeast have it. It has been around for all of evolution. So currently in San Francisco, in a biolab there are Lucy yeast growing with Lucy's gene in them. And it turns out they're not growing quite as well, which is not shocking. Lucy's a chubby baby, but you need this gene to work. And so our plan is to kind of take those yeast and test those drugs against them and see if we get any hits. And then potentially test any of those hits on mice, on Lucy's own cells, and maybe if they're safe and seem reasonable on Lucy at some point. That route is shocking to me in that it's almost privately fundable for a lot of sort of middle class Americans with, some help from friends and everything. But you're talking about the kind of $250,000 ballpark for a very robust drug repurposing campaign. And then there's the gene therapies right? This is 2022. Lucy's missing a good gene. She has 2 bad copies of one gene. Can we put that gene back in the cells that matter? And this is real science now. There's another disease called spinal muscular atrophy that used to be every pediatrician's nightmare. Kids would die before age 1 of respiratory failure because their diaphragm muscles got so weak, they stopped being able to breathe and their whole bodies got really weak. And now there's a gene therapy for that disease that it makes me tear up even to think about it, because I've taken care of SMA patients. Those kids are walking.
Wow, the hope that brings to gene mutations like PGAP3 and others. It's incredible. What is your vision for moonshots, for unicorns and all of this? Short term, long term, the potential that gene therapies and these other opportunities that, technology and other types of developing therapeutics might have on this space. What is the vision that you all have?
Yeah. The big picture vision is that we want no parent to be told what we were told. And I love our neurogeneticist. Please don't.
Of course.
What she said was true, was that there are no treatments and no cures. And that is true in 2022, but it doesn't have to be true. And I want no parent who gets a rare genetic diagnosis to go to bed thinking that night that there are no options for their child. I want people to know that the science exists and it's real. And it's not that there aren't logistical barriers along the way, financial, scientific, it's not a plug and play system yet. Each gene therapy probably costs between $3 and $5 million to develop. But that as those get more common and as the FDA gets more comfortable with them, this process will get streamlined and become, like all other processes, more cost effective as time goes on. And so that's the big picture vision. The immediate vision is funding gene therapy for PGAP3. So we've found a researcher at Nationwide Children's in Ohio who is willing to take Lucy's case on. She's amazing. She has a poster on her wall that says, "Patience is such a waste of time." And I said, "Honey, you're speaking my language." She already has Lucy's cells growing in her lab. And she's working on a virus, basically, that's harmless to humans, that will have a fixed copy of Lucy's gene inside of it. And obviously we'll give this virus to cells and mice and everything first to make sure it's safe. And that virus will deliver that gene into hopefully all the cells that need it in Lucy's brain, which is one of the logistical challenges. How do you actually get it to where it needs to go? And Lucy will have a functional copy of that gene. And our goal is to do that within 2 years, so that we're really hitting those critical neurodevelopmental windows when she's supposed to be learning to talk. She's supposed to be learning to walk. And she tries. She tries every day. If I fell down as much as that girl falls down, I would be bruised and done for.
That's amazing. That is incredible progress in the time that you've had too, and just the amazing support that you've had and the right connections aligning. And it probably has a lot to do too with the area in which you live. Do you think that there are some limitations or challenges for folks that live in rural areas with similar rare diseases?
Yes, 100%. I do think diagnosis is probably the limiting step there, though, because of access to specialists.
True.
The amount of things that had to come together for our family, for Lucy to be diagnosed at 10 months. I didn't even mention before, but the neurogeneticist who was on that week happened to be my resident when I was a medical student in medical school. And so
wow,
maybe I was a little crazy, but I wasn't totally crazy. And I think because we're physicians, she took us really seriously and took our concerns really seriously. and just had the training that she needed. And we have the resources, we have the insurance to be able to cover this for a very reasonable price for our family. And so I think those sorts of resources, once diagnosis happens, email is a powerful tool. Zach and I, April 18th is pretty much the day we stopped sleeping. We have emailed the first and last author on every paper that was ever written. And I think probably one of the challenges for other families with rare diseases is finding a scientific advisor who's willing to sort of do and interpret that stuff. We are not gene therapy scientists, but we understand the basics. And I've talked to a lot of other rare disease families that have taken, a very fast primer on the science behind gene therapy, drug repurposing, genetics in general, how the amount of information to wrap your head around is really a lot. And so I think for families who live a little bit more off the grid, for families who aren't as connected in a scientific space, and have people who can explain things to them, that would be step number 1, 2, and 3, is kind of getting someone who can help you understand the science around this stuff. Because unfortunately, as a pediatrician too, I see this all the time. There are a lot of rare diseases out there, and there are a lot of desperate parents, and that makes a market for a lot of people willing to take advantage.
Yes. So true. I'm wondering, how is social media useful for families with, of patients with rare diseases? So say you do get the diagnosis, what can social media bring to you as a rare disease family?
That is such a great question. I mean, the social media possibility is huge. One, I would just give the advice to be ready to do it. I think that it's one thing to receive a diagnosis when you have a relatively healthy baby sitting in front of you. And many genetic rare diseases are neurodegenerative, meaning kids get worse over time. And adolescents with rare diseases look very different than babies who have rare diseases. And we sort of went gung-ho and said, let's join all these groups and find all the people. And we had to take a step back for a few days because we said, we weren't quite ready to look at our future, as wonderful as all those families and children are. It's a bit of a shock. And so I would say, get yourself in a good place where you're ready to make these connections, because it is a wonderful support group with wonderful people who have children that have such a quality of life and bring such joy to their families. I think that social media is worlds ahead of the published literature for these rare diseases. There are probably less than 30 cases in the literature of PGAP3. And on the Facebook group for PGAP3, there are 20 families with kids who've never been published.
Wow.
And the literature captures often the most severe cases first.
Oh, that's so true. So you look it up and of course it's the worst case scenario. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you go to this Facebook group and you see kids who are playing with their siblings and laughing and walking. And, I do not want to minimize their symptoms. These families are severely affected by what's going on with their kids, but there's also a lot of hope there. And there's a lot of validation for things that maybe weren't described in the literature. I mean, crazy stuff, even like all the PGAP3 kids love water. They just are like, they love the bathtub, they love the hot tub, they love the ocean, and Lucy is exactly that way. If that baby is crying, you just put her in the bath with dad and she's so happy. And so it's cool to find those sorts of connections too. And then, the other possibility of social media, especially with those kinds of groups, is finding science. So who else has your child's mutation? Anyone interested in helping fund a drug repurposing study? If we had gene therapy, who could come to this center to actually get it? Who would be interested? Are we doing an N of 1 trial here? Or are we, trying to make enough initial therapy for 4 to 6 kids, which is generally sort of the phase 1 thing. And so from the science perspective, I'd say social media is essential. I took Lucy recently to the Mayo Clinic to see Dr. Marava there, who's a world CDG expert. She's a lovely person. And she learned about this Facebook group from me, and she said, okay, whose cells can you get? We need
We need cells.
Wow. I said, well, I can't get any of them. I can refer them to you.
It's like she wants to help, and social media is making her able to reach the folks that she needs to reach to be able to help.
Absolutely. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Wow. What is it like coming from the physician side of things, a pediatrician by training, and now being on the caregiver side and the patient side? What is it like being in that unique position just for you personally?
Yeah. I don't know if it makes it easier or harder.
Yeah.
I think it was critical in getting Lucy diagnosed in that I was sort of able to confidently say something's really wrong when something was really wrong. But I think I had a lot of, personal battle with, I haven't had postpartum anxiety or depression in other pregnancies, but I was really questioning myself whether, my concerns were based in Lucy pathology or based in my own pathology. And so I think being able to recognize that was helpful, but it also made me question myself a lot too. And I think a lot of moms of rare disease patients have been told that they have postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression or just an anxious mom. I am so lucky in my life that no one in, my sphere sort of was saying that. Although I felt it a little bit sometimes.
You questioned it yourself, but the people who you were speaking with understood that there was something here that needed to be worked out, and not being questioned helped you actually get answers quicker rather than waiting years on years and trying to get help for yourself first and never getting the help she needed.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Listen to moms. My favorite pediatrics mentor of all time, Tim Kelly, used to say, listen even more. And I think that is so key. And then, it allows me to sort of separate myself sometimes in a scientific way and focus on the science. It definitely allows me to treat Lucy's, other symptoms. So like her brain works a little bit slower because her cells don't communicate well, so does her gut. And
you understand that because, being a pediatrician, you really understand these types of foods I need to feed her to make sure that, if we're going on a long car ride, we want to make sure this is the type of meal she eats first, that type of thing.
And, before she was diagnosed, she had terrible reflux and constipation, and I didn't want to over medicalize her. I was like, she's just a little baby, give her some prunes, give her some more water. And now I know that there's a reason for her gut to move so slowly. So I'm like, okay, let's throw the Miralax at it. And she's so much happier and more comfortable. It's so empowering to see. She's made so much progress since her tummy doesn't hurt.
Oh, that's great.
And, I think the downside of that is that there are moments that you flip into momhood and it's almost a shock. You really think about just like, she'll probably never say mama. She's not going to talk unless we get her some treatment. And you see her struggle. I went for a walk with my husband on the beach shortly before she was diagnosed, actually, when she was still really struggling with a lot of things. And I saw this bird flying and I said, it just looks so easy. Why does Lucy have to struggle so much? And so I think that the moments that you kind of have to be on the mom side, and they don't always come with warning, are the ones that really hit home. And I'm grateful to have the pediatrician side to sort of flip to and use my brain as a way to sort of productively engage with her disease in that way, while still, sitting in the reality of being a mom with a child with rare disease.
Truly, that's a lot to hold. And whether you're a physician or not a physician, and and truly, being that physician helps you keep moving forward, even in the times when you personally feel like it's too hard to. It's really challenging. What are some things that you do as a caregiver to amazing Lucy, and as a physician, as a busy mom, as a board member of Moonshots for unicorns? What do you do in your personal life to work your best and make a difference, to take care of you?
Yeah. I have to work on self-care since April 18th, I have to say.
Self-care is just normal care, I think, when it's just all of this busyness and a lot moving. And
honestly, I had taken a year while my husband was doing some training to step back from some clinical work. And I was just doing sort of urgent care for a bit. But I'm going back to an almost full-time clinical job at the end of August. And I'm so excited about that, because taking care of other kids is so therapeutic. I became a pediatrician because I love watching kids grow up. I love supporting families. And I think it's an amazing perspective. We're dealing with PGAP3. Other families are dealing with a lot of other stuff, and we all just got to be there for each other and support each other. And so I think my work in that way actually is very therapeutic for me. And then I've tried to continue to just live in the moment and enjoy Lucy for who she is at this moment, and celebrate her successes. Having a diagnosis takes you from a deficits mentality where you're so worried that she's not making this milestone, or she's not doing this, or is she doing this funny movement, to, oh my gosh, she has this devastating diagnosis. Look at all she's doing despite that. Every milestone is such a success to celebrate. And I love spending time with her older sisters and watching them, interact with her and become these amazing human beings, who they are. Their first day of school is tomorrow. I think living in the moment that way is something that I've tried to really, really do since April 18th, and just enjoy every day for what it is, and every developmental, time for all my kids, the way it is.
What is your favorite book or quote, or something that kind of has inspired you or kept you going in this season?
Yeah. I have a lot of favorite books. My favorite quote of all time, I don't know is directly related to Lucy, although it is about helping others in some ways. So I read Huckleberry Finn with my teacher, Mrs. Stroth, who I had for 3 years of middle school, and was my favorite teacher of all time. And there's a scene in that book where Huck decides to help Jim, despite thinking that he's religiously been told that it's going to harm him. And my favorite quote from that book, because it symbolizes so much, is just, "All right, then I'll go to hell." And it's when he decides that even if it means eternal damnation, friendship is so important and helping other people is so important, that he'll go to hell for it.
Wow.
And that's what's important. And I've taken that. We talked extensively about that quote, and I love it. I think it's a key piece. It's said so simply in literature, but it's really just about the sacrifices that we need to make to be human, and to have humanity. And so that's my favorite literature quote of all time, I think.
Oh, I love that. That is so inspiring. And I know that our listeners will be inspired by that as well. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing of yourself so freely, and the courage that you had to come here and be so vulnerable and speak about what you're going through, and what's going on with PGAP3. And, what is your vision for Moonshots now? What's your dream? What would you like to have happen for Moonshots and PGAP3?
Yeah. I mean, we've met so many families now who have someone in their family suffering from PGAP3. And I'd love to be able to help all of them. There's Ella in New Zealand, there's Chase in Colorado. there's Aya in San Diego. These families have been living with this for a lot longer than we have, and they have a lot of wisdom to share. But I'm hoping that some of the drug repurposing work that we're doing and ultimately the gene therapy work can be really transformative for their lives. And I don't see, now that I've been in this space, I don't see Moonshot stopping with PGAP3.
Oh,
there's a lot of patient family foundations out there that are about the disease. And I totally get that. I want Lucy treated as soon as possible. But I think that the science of gene therapy and where we're going with it and working with the FDA, working with companies who are working on different gene therapy technologies, be it delivery or, making it less recognized by the immune system or things along those lines, that this is such an exciting field of science that we want to continue to support. Lucy's gene is one on a pathway of 16 genes. Let's start there, make those proteins, and cure those kids. And then from there, branch out,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So inspiring. And that is absolutely going to happen. I'm excited to track your trajectory and have you back on the show, as often as you'd like to talk about some of these additional therapies that you'll be working on down the road.
Yeah,
so thank you. And to finish off this conversation, right, where can our listeners find you online and reach you?
So moonshotsforunicorns.org is the main page where we post, all the scientific updates. And we're going to start having some videos of other families affected by PGAP3, hopefully soon. You can learn more about PGAP3 there. If you want to follow Lucy's personal journey and anything that we're trying for her, sometimes we'll, include something, a new supplement that we're trying. We're going to try folate next week. She is at Lucy, the PGAP3 Goose on Instagram. And there's lots of cute baby videos there as well. And then there's a Facebook page for Moonshots for Unicorns that's fully searchable as well.
That's terrific. Now, before I forget, did you happen to bring tea with you today?
We sure did.
Tell me about your mug.
Yeah. So I'm mostly an herbal tea drinker, but it's 6 a.m. here in California. So I had to drink some green tea this morning with a little bit of caffeine. So a little caffeine, a little antioxidants, and a little pomegranate with it for a little sweetness. I think sounds like a great way to start a day.
That is too good. Absolutely. I'm going to have to try that tomorrow morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on, Grace. This was really fun. And I so appreciate your caring about Lucy and other kids with rare diseases and everyone's, just caring makes such a difference.
It's a true pleasure. And we wish you and Lucy and the PGAP3 community all the best in your journey.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us too. Check out the Hit Like a Girl podcast website and YouTube page for more great guests like Dr. Geri today. Cheers.